Hey, YouTube. Let's do this.
Well, they say I should approach you with caution, but not to let you be aware of my fear. Never know what you'll find. Don't understand your kind round here. I'm watching your moves, they look so radical. Hearing your words, they sound fanatical. Something inside reveals you're magical. Oh, how can I get enough? You're a strange animal, that's what I know. But you're a strange animal, I got to follow. They've been trying to stick a line in your system, analyzing the defenses you hold, trying to open wide, hoping to step inside your soul. But everything here is unfamiliar. Nothing they've seen remotely similar. How can it be you're so peculiar? Oh, how can I get enough? You're a strange animal, that's what I know. But you're a strange animal, I've got to follow. I've got to follow. I've got to follow. How can I get enough? You're a strange animal, that's what I know. But you're a strange animal, I got to follow. Oh, I'm in the spiritus. Wow. Oh, you're a strange animal, that's what I know. You're a strange animal, I got to follow. Whoa, you're a strange animal, that's what I know. But you're a strange animal, I got to follow. Oh, I'm in the spiritus. Oh, you're a strange animal, that's what I know. But you're a strange animal, I got to follow.
And hey, everybody. Welcome to Squatch Talk. I'm Pat. How's everybody doing tonight? Thanks for being here. And what I have for you tonight is a very special presentation that was kind of inspired to me. I'll get to that in a second, but that I think most people haven't seen. So the vast majority of my viewers have not seen this. So it's kind of good as a standalone uh, live episode tonight. Which oddly enough, I am having to throw this out there in live. We are live right now. This is not a like a scheduled pre-recorded thing. But what you'll be seeing, it did already happen. And I should link it. I didn't bother to do that in the description. But I should link it to Kat's channel. But yeah, it's a great conversation I had with an actual primatologist, Erika, who's an interesting person who is interested. You'll see, actually interested in the Bigfoot phenomenon, but reserves judgment as a professional, which she should. But it's how you have a conversation, and it's a great example of why these conversations can easily be had in public. Erika is not at any point, and she's done this before, by the way. She's also had public discussions with Meldrum. So she's not at all worried about her career. So to me, that's this video and others like it debunk this myth that these conversations have to happen behind closed doors. And so that's kind of why I'm posting it, is because of my sort of weird interactions with Project Zoobook. For whatever reason, I was invited to be there, and this was a while back, so this isn't even recent. But I was invited to be there. The rug got pulled out from under me, and I'm like, "Well, what's going on? Like, why like, why last minute do I get canceled being, so I can see what's going on in this Project Zoobook thing?" And and then I just, I never got a chance to like get back in or try it again or anything. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what's going on with that, how important it is or isn't. But, you know, it's like, it's the idea that there's some kind of important discussion going on behind closed doors because there's people there that don't want the Bigfoot stigma attached to them. And this conversation I had with Erika completely debunks that. There's a way to talk about the phenomena with the proper scientific professionals, no matter who they are or what they do. If they run a zoo or they're an anthropologist or a primatologist, I mean, Meldrum's already kind of proved that, it's perfectly fine and he's high profile. But anyway, so that inspired me to throw this out there, which again, I'm pretty sure the vast majority of the audience, the people that will end up watching this video, have never seen. So this is brand new to them. This might as well be a standalone Squatch Talk episode. And so I'm about to get right to it. Hopefully, it also got my wheels turning. I mean, I'd love to have Erika on the show and have another conversation with her 100%, because I was watching it last night and there was all these moments I was like, oh man, I would have, like now I would have said this or I would have said that, differently. Because I went into this whole thing pretty nervous. She's a high educated person, and I don't have any high education background, just street smarts, if you will. Anyway, I went into it pretty nervous, but I think I did a great job. And my ultimate goal was just to successfully have a good conversation with a professional who knows what the hell they're talking about. So let's get right to it. It'll just take me kind of hopefully 15 seconds to get it set up. I may jump back in at the end and talk a little bit more, or I may just shut it down. We'll see. But we're going to get right into it. I'm going to pull myself out. I can't mute the mic. Okay, yeah. So just give me a second, guys, and I'll get this going. Yeah, it should be good. And hopefully I will keep quiet. You might hear some dogs bark every now and then, but let's hope this goes well.
No.
I don't have a preference. I really don't.
You know what? I'm going to toss a coin.
Okay.
Heads for Pat, tails for Erika, and it's a 2p coin. And I dropped it. Balls. Right, let's have a look.
This coin flip's making me nervous.
It's a tails. Who did I say was tails?
I'm tails.
You were tails, Erika? So,
Right.
if you want to screen share anything, there's just a button at the bottom that says screen share. And I'll just have to edit the OBS a little bit live without Creaky to fit that. Okay, so before we...
All right, can you see that? Can everyone see that?
I can. Yes.
Okay, cool. I think I got to present. How's that? Better? More full screen?
Yes. Yes.
Awesome.
Okay, all right, I'll jump in. This is a pretty short opener. I don't even know that I'll use the full 8 minutes, but I tend to monologue, so, I probably will. So, Bigfoot. This is a Bigfoot conversation. So, what is Bigfoot? Well, Bigfoot is the colloquial word for some kind of currently undiscovered hominoid. I say hominoid because I'm kind of allowing for anything within the ape family, including lesser apes like gibbons. Because I think bipedality in gibbons kind of lends itself to, well, we got to allow for all possibilities. And Bigfoot primarily refers to North American cryptids, but Bigfoot usually, when I think Bigfoot, I'm usually considering like, okay, all of our hominoid cryptids across the world, from the Ibugogo to the Yeti to the Yowie. Now, as a hominoid, Bigfoot is characterized by a large size, obligately bipedal locomotion, thick hair, weirdly enough, a sagittal crest in both sexes, so that's an anchor for the jaw muscles, and potentially facial hair, which I always find kind of interesting in the Patterson-Gimlin film, is that Patty of the Patterson-Gimlin film is a female, but she's kind of got a lot of facial stubble going on. Now, the big question for me is we've had thousands of Bigfoot reports throughout the years, and dozens of proposed videos of such animals. But if there is a large and unknown hominoid lumbering across several continents, why haven't we found a body or unique DNA? And what about the fossil record? Why has such an animal left no trace of its evolution? And I find this particularly interesting because as someone who studies extant primates and also has an interest in human evolution, I picked up a minor in anthropology in undergrad. We find a lot of weird bones all across Africa and all across all of the other continents as well. From microscopic, or nearly microscopic, like little fragments of fingers or molars, to full-on skulls. So my question is, if we've got this, hominoid living in North America in particular, which we tend to hone in on, is it a paranthropine? When did it cross over? When did it cross over from Africa and make its way to North America? And what did it descend from? Because, we can trace back, for instance, the hobbits of Flores, Homo floresiensis, these 3-foot-tall, very diminutive hominins. We can trace them back to potentially Homo habilis. And how did it get there? Well, we don't know yet, but we can tell that that's probably the line that it took. So why have we not found anything fossil record-wise? And what about a body or unique DNA? Because cryptid hominoids have been found before. I think that tends to surprise people. But the billy ape was the lion killer, the lion-killing ape of the Congo, was a cryptid for quite some time in the mythos of Central Africa until people were like, well, let's go see if it's there. And so they traipsed around in the 3.5 million square, I put acres here, but it's actually square miles, 500 million acres, but it's 3.5 million square miles, of the Congo rainforest, looking around for the billy ape, and they found it. They found a very large species of chimpanzee. It's actually a subgroup of Pantroglodytes schweinfurthii, and it's quite large. It's weirdly big, and it has its own unique behavioral cultures. Like it builds nests on the ground. That's kind of unique for chimpanzees. But we did DNA test it, and we revealed that the billy ape was a chimpanzee. It was, for instance, a hybrid between a chimp and a gorilla, which is what some people were saying. Now, research is still going on there about the specific cultures of this animal, of this specific kind of chimpanzee. It's no longer a cryptid. But the question is, if we could find a cryptid hominoid in the Congo, why can't we find one in North America, where we've got way more eyes on it? It's got, theoretically less places to hide in the sense that its hiding places are more fragmented rather than a contiguous forest like the Congo. Now, genetic analysis, DNA is another big one because genetic analysis has been done on submitted hair samples. This was a study, I believe this was in 2012, that looked at hair samples attributed to a bunch of anomalous primates, aka primate cryptids. And it was a really interesting study because they actually found that some of the Yeti hair belonged to a now extinct type of polar bear, Himalayan polar bear, which is neat. That's really awesome. But none of them belonged to anomalous primates. And there was a lot of submitted DNA, 57 samples, I believe, something like that. And they also did it specifically for the Yeti again, and they found that a lot of them were from Himalayan black bears and Himalayan brown bears. So this is actually a separate article, more recent, from 2017, telling us that, pardon me, that there are some things to be afraid of, certainly in the Tibetan Plateau, but perhaps not necessarily a hominoid, a mystery hominoid. So for my opponent, what's the best support for Bigfoot in your opinion? And in your opinion, why have we not found trace evidence of such an animal? Because for me, right, and I've included the Patterson-Gimlin film here because I love the Patterson-Gimlin film. But I'm wondering where's our tangible, actually holding in your hand support for this mystery hominoid? And what kind of reasoning do we have for maybe why we haven't found it? And that's all I really got. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Perfect. Thanks so much. If you stop screen sharing, I'll just readjust the OBS because I can do that kind of stuff now because I'm getting good at this. Excuse me. Okay, so that was Erika's opener. Pat, it's over to you, sir. Oh, off you go.
Okay, I am quite outclassed here, and I might concede. Just kidding. That was a very well put together opener, Erika, and I appreciate it. And some of those questions you're going to have to bring back to me. I was trying to file them away in my head, basically. And so I would love to discuss a lot of that. I would just say this. It's interesting to be here. I'm glad to be here and kind of represent the phenomena, which is what I call it. It's known as Bigfoot, or a lot of people call it Sasquatch. And there's a lot to unpack there, I would say. Everything from the what I would consider the best visual evidence that we do have captured on film, which would be the Patterson-Gimlin film, to the, I would say tens of thousands of anecdotal accounts, which is not, you can't present that. It's not scientific evidence, but to me, it's some form of evidence that proves at least that there's some kind of phenomenon going out here. And I want an explanation of why people are seeing 8-foot tall monkey man in the woods, because that is happening. And the best way I could frame that is that, okay, even if everyone's lying, that's still a very interesting psychological thing going on. Why do we have this cult of liars from all around North America, which is what I'm focused on here? I'm not trying to get into Yeti or worldwide reports of these things. I'm really focused on North America. That's where I live. That's where I believe their habitat exists, primarily. And so why would people be lying? Like, I'm pretty sure I could go to, a psychologist and say, wouldn't that be an interesting study? Why, a bunch of people from around the country are lying about the same thing. So to me, it's a legitimate phenomena, and I want an explanation. And so that's why I swim in the waters of the Bigfoot community, which, a lot of people aren't familiar with. And I will freely admit that it could be a very convoluted place. But I always separate the anecdotal accounts from the Bigfoot world, the Bigfoot community. To me, those are two different things. As far as evidence goes, we have tracks. They're verifiable, and we do have Dr. Meldrum, who is a foot morphologist expert, and he's been able to verify a lot. So we have hundreds of casted tracks, even from the Patterson-Gimlin site. We have two different sets of tracks that were cast from that site. So we have the visual evidence captured on film and the tracks to go along with them, and a living eyewitness. That's to me, that's a very powerful combination of things that should be somewhat compelling, I think, to an open-minded person. And with that, I say let's just get right into the discussion. I'll relinquish the rest of my time.
Okay, sounds great. What I do just want to do is, I don't think I said this to you, Erika, before, but this whereby that we're using, or maybe it's my internet, we seem to build up a bit of a lag as time goes on. So if it appears like there's a lag and we're accidentally talking over each other, if I just say, all you've got to do is refresh the page, we all come back and it eliminates the lag.
All right, cool.
So it might appear that people are, interrupting you, but it won't be on purpose, and we'll just refresh. Yeah, so let's go back and forth a little bit. I'll give you, I don't know, we'll just see how it goes, and then once the discussions run a bit dry, we'll start taking questions from the chat, and we'll call it a day. Take it away, guys. I don't know who wants to go first, but I'm going to sit back and listen.
Yeah, I would love to dig in. I want to give my appreciation to Pat for being here, of course, but to the Patterson-Gimlin film, because the Patterson-Gimlin film is very strange. I will be the first one to say that it's quite odd. I've looked at it, I've read about it a lot, and for those of you who maybe don't know, the deal with the Patterson-Gimlin film is that the intermembranal index is off, right? The proportions don't seem to match a guy in a suit. And we could talk about how if it is a suit, it's a really good suit, and it's especially for the time period. So I want to be the first one to say that the Patterson-Gimlin film is strange. And Pat and I were talking beforehand, like it hasn't been officially debunked, quote unquote, in the sense that it's easy to write off. And as I said to Pat beforehand, to me, right, a very strange film is not enough to justify a new hominoid in North America. And I've said I've included other hominoids, anomalous hominoids in my opener, but we can totally just talk about North America. That's cool with me. So the casts that were taken from that side are also very interesting. And I wanted to ask you, do you know if Jeffrey Meldrum has the interdigitations on those tracks? Like if they've got the dermal ridges that we tend to see?
I do not believe any dermal ridges were captured from that trackway. The Patty trackway. I'll call her Patty. That's our Bigfoot name for her, Patty. So I do not believe there is any dermal ridges. The condition for capturing dermal ridges, the conditions have to be just right. Yeah. And you have to cast it just right, which kind of makes sense. I mean, it makes sense to me. But what we do have is, Roger Patterson, he casted 2 tracks. So he went and found the best ones to cast, and he casted those 2. And then 9 days later, a man named Bob Titmus showed up, and he cast 9 tracks. And actually, Bob Gimlin, who's still alive and was there, at when the Patterson-Gimlin film was shot, he had covered up some of the tracks. to try and protect them from weather, like instinctively, I guess. So anyway, so we have a total of 12, I guess, or 11 casts from the actual visual recording of that, and we have a living witness.
So the interesting thing about Patty, I like primates. I like looking at primates. And when I see the Patterson-Gimlin film, my first kind of inclination is to say, okay, if this is, let's take the leap and say that this is a real hominoid. In fact, it's bipedal, so I would even go so far as to say this is a hominin. A member of somewhere along our lineage, whether it's a paranthropine or a member of the Australopithecines or maybe even like a Candianthropine, like somewhere far offshoot. Let's take that step. So my question would be, looking at Patty, she's got some really interesting traits for an ape, right? She's female because she's got these breasts in the front, but the breasts are covered with hair, which is strange. That's not something that we typically see in the apes. We don't see that in gorillas. We see it in the lesser apes. We see it in gibbons. But and that's why I included hominoids, because I'm thinking, okay, there are gibbon traits involved here. But we don't see it in any of the great apes, including ourselves. Also, we don't see ischial callosities in the back, the exposed kind of rear end, so to speak. And since she's female, typically that kind of signaling is common in primates, except for humans and gorillas. Actually, really, pandas are the only ones who do the estrus swellings. And she's got a sagittal crest, which is interesting because that's typically a male trait in primates. The sagittal crest is this big bony ridge that goes across the top of the crania, and where the jaw muscles attach. You know that. I was just saying that for everyone else. And so my first inkling is like, okay, if the Patterson-Gimlin film is legitimate, what is up with Patty? Why does she look the way that she does? Because this is such a unique evolutionary path to take. All of these traits are very strange. And then my first question would be, okay, well, for her to get to where she is, and given all the sightings of Bigfoot in North America, should we not have found some kind of fossil evidence or a body at this point that we find? Because, as an anecdotal support, rainforests, like, for instance, the Pacific Northwest, it's very difficult to find fossils there. It's incredibly difficult. But we still find them. We find them in Southeast Asia, for instance. We recently found, I think it was a radius, it might have been a humerus, an arm bone from an ancient gibbon. And we've also found molars, of course, from Gigantopithecus blacki and things of that nature. So we still find trace evidence of them. So why do you suppose that we don't find any for the proposed hominin, let's say, of North America?
I would say number one, they're rare. So there's a population. There would have to be a population, but at the same time, very rare. And they're number two, they're in remote areas for the most part. So if they die, probably die in a fairly remote area, I would guess. Now I'm kind of theorizing, obviously.
Yeah.
And of course the conditions, wet, foresty, conditions, like you said, like nature kind of scatters anything dead up pretty quick.
So what do you, out of pure curiosity, what do you suppose the range is for this animal?
I would say it would be similar to black bear territory. Okay. Anywhere you would find a healthy population of black bear would be the kind of habitat that they would be in. So the Appalachian chain, which is 1,000-mile, remote area, if you will, that goes from Georgia to Maine, and then of course the Pacific Northwest is, just endlessly remote up into. Forget borders, right? Up into Canada, and you could fly over Canada in an airplane, at 500 miles an hour you could spend 3 hours flying over Canada, remote, like where men aren't,
Yeah, and I think that like I can get on board with that. Like I can get on board with as far as like current specimens that are contemporaneous with us today. Like for instance, I hike a lot, and I've never run into a black bear skeleton, and I hike in a lot of areas where black bears live. So I can get on board with that. My issue is if hominins live here in North America, then they got here when there was a land bridge. You could have rafted, I suppose. I would imagine that it would be when the land bridge across the Bering Strait was available.
Yeah.
Now that comes and goes. That Bering Strait land bridge does come and go. And in Jeffrey Meldrum's debate with Science Side Up, he was talking about how it's there for a lot longer than we give it credit for. So I'm cool with going back. We can go back as far as, say, the Paranthropines. We can go back 2.5 million years and say, at some point, a Paranthropine subgroup, because I'm thinking sagittal crest, it's probably a Paranthropine. It looks the most like the Paranthropine, and it's bipedal. It's got that inline helix. I'm thinking it's probably a Paranthropine. Crosses over the Bering Strait, right, and ends up in North America. But we find so many Paranthropine remains across Africa. So why haven't we, we've got 2.5 million years of Paranthropine subgroups of Bigfoot, Sasquatch-style hominins living in North America. What about the fossil remains? You know what I mean? Like, and if we've got a range across, a large portion of North America, you would think that, particularly since many Native American groups they reference this strange Sasquatch-style animal and draw pictures of it and things like that, and the Bigfoot community very frequently will point to that and say, look, they're referencing it. Which means if we're buying into it, it's got to be in these arid areas too, where fossilization is pretty easy. So why do you suppose, with that long period of time, we're not finding anything?
Okay, fair enough. And to that, I would say this: the fossil record is incomplete.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Gigantopithecus. We're extremely lucky to even know that species existed. It was only because the teeth were so big and the enamel was so thick. The porcupines, things like that couldn't actually eat them, and they were they were dragged into these limestone caves to be found thousands of years later, and still didn't find them until the proper person, somebody who knew what they were looking at, walked into a china shop, and they were selling dragon's teeth, right? And so, like, we got lucky on two fronts: that those remains were dragged into those caves, and that the right person came along and found them in a china shop and went, whoa, we have something here. Thus, Gigantopithecus. So we were lucky to even know that species exists. So as far as fossilization goes, and I'm not an expert on it, it's just that I know that about, Gigantopithecus, is that, the fossil record's incomplete. And I have no explanation as to why, we have not got a fossilized Bigfoot. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we have no fossils of chimpanzees, do we?
There's very few. We have a couple from chimps and gorillas at the very beginnings, kind of the Pannin and Grillan lines. But you're right. There's not very many. There's a huge bias to the hominins because they came down from the trees and end up in these arid savanna-style environments. But we do find some. There's just not that much. There's very little. So I would agree with you on that front. I think for me, the stumbling block on that point is that North America is so fossil rich for Mesozoic animals. We look for dinosaurs everywhere here. So my thinking is that at some point, someone would be out, in the Morrison Formation or something along those lines, chipping away, looking for, tyrannosaurs or Edmontosaurs or something like that. And then they'd be like, in higher up strata. And then they'd be like, okay, it's really weird. In this area that we're supposed to only be finding, mammoth remains, we've got like this helix that looks like this looks hominin to us. But it's not human, it's not H. sapiens. So, because, I think people are looking a lot. I I could get on board with saying, okay, well, if these animals are strictly living in North American rainforests, well, no one's looking for fossils in North American rainforests. No one's looking for dinosaur bones there. But then I struggle with this idea of, you've got a bipedal hominin. Where do we thrive? Well, every bipedal hominin that we've known so far has lived in open savanna. So my thinking is that if you've got this Bigfoot style hominin, it's crossing over this land bridge and it's ending up in North America for whatever reason, a couple 100,000 years ago to up to 2.5 million. And I would imagine it's probably going to be sticking around in the grasslands because that's what it evolved in. Whether it came from a paranthropine or, a Gigantopithecus. If it came from a Gigantopithecus, then I'm like, okay, it's going to stick to the rainforest. But then it wouldn't have that bipedal stance and inline halix and upright stance. So it's like, if it comes from a Gigantopithecus, this is a quadruped, knuckle-walking, orang style ape.
Yes.
So then it's not walking upright, I don't think.
Right.
But if it comes, and Gigantopithecus lived up until fairly recently. If memory serves, they didn't go extinct until 10 to 50,000 years ago, something like that.
Yeah, you're in the ballpark.
Yeah, something realistic like that. But then paranthropines, they seem to just fit the bill for Bigfoot to me.
Okay.
And they're bipedal savanna dwellers. So why why in your opinion do you think that is? Like, how do you square that?
That's an interesting question. And again, it's a little bit above my pay grade. All I know is that they seem to exist in territories that are heavily forested, very wet, and have elevation and terrain. So yeah, they don't do the savanna thing. We do that.
Yeah.
Pretty much. We live in flat areas for the most part. Even in Denver is down at the base of the Rockies. It's not up in the Rockies. So we don't do well with terrain. Humans aren't designed for terrain very well. We have to take tools. We have to take a third appendage. A lot of people use hiking sticks. We have to take water. We love to go out there, but we're not built for it, really. These things seem to be built for it. They seem to be quite comfortable in very heavy terrain, wet areas, and because that's where they're seen for the most part. There are exceptions, but if you take the body of anecdotal accounts, they're in forested areas that have some kind of terrain and wet.
Gotcha. Yeah. So you're almost thinking like the thought process would almost be like if this animal did evolve from some kind of paranthropine biped, then it's probably since adapted to this more rainforest style condition.
That would be the theory, yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Obviously that's something that could certainly occur. The interesting thing about hominins that we know that are very closely related to us, for example, Neanderthalensis, they're horrible, based on their morphology, they would have been horrible compared to us when it comes to long distance across flat terrain. But they've got this nice midfoot that's perfect for these real rugged crossings, so they would have kicked their butts when it came to making their way across the steppes and stuff like that. So I can get on board with that, but I'm still struggling though with okay, there's that transition period, right? Of savanna dweller to moving into these isolated, or rather not isolated at the time, but these big contiguous forests. And you would think that we would find something between that, because obviously it's coming over here, crossing that land bridge at some point. And that land bridge is going to be not exactly heavily forested. So you've got this open plains dweller coming to North America and eventually adapting to these big forests. But that interim is where I struggle. And we find a lot of interim transitional species are the name of the game.
Right.
Everything is transitional, of course, but we find a lot of stuff in that interim. Ardipithecus ramidus is one of my favorites. It's actually my favorite hominin. And this is this hominin that's could be bipedal, but it's probably suspensory through the trees, which is interesting. And it's got this real awkward gait when it's walking on 2 feet. So it's like this perfect example of this individual that
sounds familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's interesting. It's really cool.
Yeah. So,
sorry.
I just wanted to ask you a question. Would you agree that we do have examples of Bigfoot type species in the fossil record already?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, that's again, when I see Bigfoot, I'm like, that's a paranthropine.
Right.
Like, that's the adaptive paranthropine. I'm like, that's what that looks like to me. From the sagittal crest, because paranthropines were these big, they were megadont animals. They did nothing but sit and chew tubers with their massive molars that are, they're slightly shorter than us, and yet their molars are 4 times the size. They've got these big teeth in the back, and that's why I could get behind the dual sex sagittal crest because of that, because they're
Right.
like, they sit around and they chew stuff all day. And they were bipeds, but they weren't nearly as good on their 2 feet as, say, we are, or later members of Homo, or even some of the Australopithecines. So as far as Bigfoot morphologically, I don't really have an issue with that. Like, this isn't an animal that I feel is mechanically impossible by any stretch of the imagination.
Okay.
For me, it's almost like it's in the wrong place and in the wrong time. It's stuck where it shouldn't be, almost.
Yeah. It is. I mean, to be honest with you, Erika, it's a bit of a head scratcher for me too, and some of the minutia we're talking about here is a little bit over my pay grade. Even though I understand it, I know. But my thing is this: is that there has to be a reason why so many people either are seeing 8-foot tall monkey men in the woods or lying about it. And there's a phenomena there that I think is worth exploring.
I agree with you, and to be honest, that's quite strange to me too. And it's not like the it's not like that this is it's not like flying saucers, right? Like flying saucers I'm not talking about UFOs, like weird things we see in the sky have happened since the dawn of time, and whether or not that's something natural that we can't explain, like ball lightning or something like that, or extraterrestrial visitors.
Right.
Who can say? That's above my pay grade, to be honest. I don't know enough about that to even.
Yeah, mine too.
Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, the wild man archetype is very present, especially here. And I've seen some of the footage, and some of the footage that I've seen, Patterson Gimlin is the best.
I agree.
But some of the footage that I see, I'm like, okay, that's really, to me, that looks like a black bear. Or some of it, I'll be like, okay, that looks kind of weird. But we also live in 2021, and VFX has gotten a lot better. For me, the Patterson Gimlin holds up because of when it was taken.
Yep.
It's really, really weird, and I don't have an explanation for it. But some of the other problems to me for a North American hominin are like, okay, well, like I mentioned some of the DNA studies, right? Like eDNA or environmental DNA,
Yes,
is really cool, and I'm wondering why we haven't picked up on some kind of anomalous primate.
I can tell you, because they're not looking for it. They're not. So here's the thing. Here's part of the reason why I'm here, Erika, is to sort of bridge the gap. It's an outreach program. It's like I live and swim in the Bigfoot waters, and it's not full of a lot of professionals. The scientific world is full of professionals. You're a professional, okay? And so if I find a trackway, let's say me, I wouldn't find a trackway, but if one of my buddies found a trackway, and I want to do an environmental DNA study, there's no way to do that. I can't bring that team in. They'll just go, well, whatever, dude. Like Bigfoot's not real, So environmental DNA is cutting edge technology.
Yeah.
It's also very expensive,
And it's new.
and it requires professionals. Bigfooters can't do it. They can't even collect it properly, in my opinion. So there's your disconnect. It's like, yeah, you're right. Environmental DNA would be a great way to do that. The problem is that we have to bridge that gap between the phenomena is real to the scientific community, to where they're actually interested in doing an environmental DNA study.
Right. And the thinking is, I'm you know, putting myself in the Bigfoot enthusiast and the Bigfoot scientist realm here. It's like the ones that have been done, like the hair samples that have been tested, like from my opener, right? Like it's such a small sample size compared to what we could potentially be missing. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I can get behind that. I mean, I'm very sympathetic to Bigfoot because I want Bigfoot to be legitimate. Wow, that would be so awesome. A North American hominin, that would be incredible. That's not humans, of course. And I'm thinking, like, it's kind of interesting that Bigfoot hasn't gotten the same treatment that, like, the Loch Ness Monster has, because I was in, excuse me, Inverness last year. COVID is cramping my my temporal understanding, but
Right.
I got to see the Loch Ness Monster Museum, and I was in Dromna Drocket with my fiance, and we were looking around, and we're like, oh man, we're going to see Nessie. And the museum was very interesting because they actually covered some of the studies that they've done in Loch Ness, and they've basically been like, look, we're not on board with, like, the Loch Ness Monster Museum was like, look, we're not on board with plesiosaur being trapped in the loch.
Right.
It's not doable given the geologic conditions of the area. And instead, when they did eDNA, they were like, it turns out there's either a lot of small eels or a few big eels in the loch, which may explain what's going on with the Loch Ness Monster.
Right.
And so I'm thinking to myself, man, I really wish we could do something like a study at that level for anomalous hominins, right? And it's interesting that
it requires funding.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. I'd love to see it. I really would. I would love to see that.
It can be done. It absolutely can be done. But again, and of course, Meldrum talks about this too, because Meldrum is in the scientific community.
Yes, he is.
And he's published some things. He's tried to get people on board. You know, I'm not Meldrum. I don't swim in those kind of waters up there. You know, he's trying. And so my whole thing is, well, how about this? I'll do an outreach program and try and bring in more Meldrums, something like that, you know.
But the interesting thing is too, Jeffrey Meldrum, again, he's like, there isn't a guy who's more qualified to talk about Bigfoot than Jeffrey Meldrum. This is a man that studies hominin locomotion for a living. That's what he does.
Yep.
And boy, does he have the credentials to back it up. And for instance, he's done some, like, I've read a lot of his mainstream work, his conventional work, because I like anthropology and primatology and stuff like that. And he's the guy. He's the guy for that. He's done a lot on it. I've seen some of his kind of like cohorts accuse his Bigfoot work of being less rigorous than his I guess conventional science work. And while I can understand where they're coming from, I almost think to myself, okay, well, maybe that bias that they're accusing him of, they have as well. You know what I mean? And are looking at his other work through that lens. But for me, it's almost just like I'm with you. I think it's weird. When people are like, "What do you think about Bigfoot?" I'm like, I think it's weird. It's there are a lot of people who are seeing this 8-foot tall hominoid running around North America, and then I think about it and I'm like, okay, well, what can we look at that? How can we look at that, right? And there's a portion of it, I'm sure you would agree, there's obviously a lot of people who are hoaxing, and there's obviously a lot of people who are full of nonsense. They're in it for, I want to fake a Bigfoot encounter, right? And then there's like, it's almost like the Project Blue Book stuff, right, for UFOs, where it's like a lot of this stuff is explainable, and then there's a very small portion that isn't. And for me, in the same way that doesn't mean it's aliens, I don't know that I can make that step and say, okay, yes, this is a hominin. Maybe something strange is going on, but I would almost be more inclined to be like, there are a whole lot of I know a lot about the primate sanctuaries that are located all around North America, and there are a lot of them, and usually they're biased to the south, which is strange given the prevalence of Pacific Northwest Bigfoot sightings. But at least for the ones in the south, I would almost be more inclined to believe that there was an incident where a chimp got out and was walking around the forest, and someone was like, "What is this chimp doing here?" than I would be that we're seeing this mystery hominin, right?
Perhaps.
But I'm with you. I think I am of the school that it at least deserves attention, right?
It
Like,
does.
obviously something strange is going on, and we gave it the attention in the Himalayas, right? Like, we took it serious. There were some scientists who were like, let's look at the hair samples that were submitted and let's see what they are.
Right.
And I don't know why we haven't done that here, because the prospect to me is exciting enough. Even if it's possible, we should give it a look.
Well, I'm glad there's a new generation of interest. You know, I hope that you can have that conversation with your colleagues. You know, of similar age. I'll just say this: it's like, you know, the anecdotal accounts. A lot of them are very compelling, and it's not, you know, the first thing that people go to is, you know, misidentification of bears and things like that. And to me, that would be basically a hallucination, not misidentification. You know, so I mean, you know, maybe sometimes people see escaped chimps, but you know, obviously chimps aren't 8 feet tall.
Yep.
So there's really a ton of anecdotal stuff, you know, that does fit that sort of patty frame, if you will. It's not bigger. And so yeah, I would love for the scientific community to explore it, but it seems to be a sort of a taboo subject for them, and you get into how things, you know, work in the professional academic scientific community, and you have interns, there's money involved, and so they just seem to kind of go, well, I mean, Bigfoot, why would we waste our resources on something that we think is just silly?
Can I chuck a question in the mix? I know it's your debate, but I'm just interested because you've mentioned a few times now, Pat, that the sheer number of sightings, you know, is something that you want explaining. Can I just ask, when people report these sightings, like people who live nowhere near each other, have never met each other, and report seeing something, what are the common things that those reports all have in common? You know, the thing, other than just seeing something tall and big, like what are the common, or are there any other kind of like common threads and details, if that makes sense?
Okay, so a lot of the commonalities would be, you know, how they look. So yeah, their size is pretty much always there, even though some people do see smaller ones, which we would call juveniles, I guess. But they're hairy. They have large, wide mouths. Their mouths are very wide, like almost no neck, big head. They're intimidating. They don't seem to be happy that they're there. So there's always some kind of like feeling of intimidation. So again, they're not trying to shake your hand or have coffee. You know, they're like one of the common things that people say is that it looked at me like you're not supposed to be here, which again is a sign of intelligence, that they look like they're intelligent, that they have some human features, a hooded nose. And some people describe them as being Native American looking almost, and but their demeanor is some form of intimidation, you know, or shock. People have even said that, you know, it looked just as shocked to see me as I was to see it. And again, the areas that these encounters happen, or you know, they're you know, wet forested terrain areas.
Erika, can I expand that to you? So, like with Pat saying that there'd be like an intimidation, you know, it would sorry, the report, so that it pulls a bit of a face, it's quite intimidating. How does that compare to your understanding of what would possibly be its closest relatives? Like, how would they behave if you trod on their turf?
Yeah, so that's actually kind of funny that you put it that way, Pat. You shouldn't be here because I had the utmost pleasure of seeing wild chimpanzees in Gombe Stream National Park, Tanzania, in 2015, and I tell this story a lot when I'm on air because it was actually the moment that I decided I wanted to do primatology and that I wanted to take that route. But I encountered, we were all following a group of females, a group of young females, or not necessarily young, but mothers. Two of them had infants. And I broke away from the group when we were tracking them through the forest, and I wanted to get a closer look, so I strayed away from the group and was trying to get a little bit closer, and I got too close to one of the mothers who had an infant. And we made eye contact, and it was a very weird moment because there was that kind of recognition of okay, here we are, two cognitively inclined animals making eye contact with each other, and whether I'm anthropomorphizing or not, who knows? I probably am. I'm inclined to believe that I am. But there was that kind of expression of what are you doing here? This is not where you're supposed to be. And she gave me a warning hoot, and I was like, holy crap, I'm about to get torn limb from limb. And I backed up against a tree because I was like, I'm really sorry. And very quickly retreated. And it was kind of like a gentle hey, she knew she could tear me to pieces, and I knew that too. So why did there need to be more than just a brief warning? But yeah, I mean, chimpanzees are very cognitively inclined, as are gorillas, and they don't feel the need to necessarily attack you because it's almost like they know that they could if they wanted. But that being said, I'm almost a little bit surprised that occasionally Bigfoot individuals would show surprise because you would think that they would be quite used to human presence. Given that humans are everywhere these days, you would think that they would know.
Well, we stick to our areas. When we go into the wilderness, we tend to stick to our areas, our hiking trails, our our state parks. So we really don't go remote exploring off trail. Some people do, but yeah. So I would theorize that they know where we were at all time. They know our areas that we like to go out into, and maybe they observe us sometimes in that situation. But if you go out there far enough, if you get too close to where their habitat is without us, they will scare you out of the woods. Seems to be the thing.
So have you read very much about billy apes? I mentioned them very briefly in my opening.
Yeah, I'm familiar with billy apes.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about these guys is that when the 2001 group went out there and was like, we're going to go see what the deal is with these lion killing apes, and one of the young women who is a part of the main team, I forget her last name, Williams was one of them, but I don't think this was Williams. They were out there, and they noted that these chimps deep in the forest didn't seem to have a fear of humans, because they were like, what are these things? They very likely had never encountered them. This was so deep into the forest that villages didn't go that far. They didn't penetrate that deep into the Congo, of this part being Billy Forest, at least to the knowledge of the researchers. That's what they hypothesized. It's like, okay, well, they're not scared of us. Most animals are, because we're big, and these are a larger population, size-wise than most Pantroglodytes. But they were like, it's really interesting that these particular chimps aren't that scared of us. That's very strange. And there was almost like a shared moment of, oh, what are you? You look kind of like me. And they would turn to them, and then the billy apes would go back into the forest because they were like, well, you're not us, even though you look like us. I guess we'll just go on our merry way. But it wasn't necessarily like a threat this way. So I'm curious as to why, if you've got these North American hominins, like why it could just be a population thing, but why they're being aggressive, whereas other hominids, I suppose, that we know have never encountered humans aren't.
Yeah, again, I don't know, because now we're getting into where they come from. I'm more of I think they're here. Like, so it's hard for me, like, scientifically to, like, why, where do these things come from? What branch are they a part of?
Yeah.
All I know is that they escort people out of the woods all the time. And they do exactly that. They will escort you out. And I say intimidation, but just the seeing something that big look you in the eye and say, "Get the hell out of here, man," like that's good enough.
So I've got a question for you, because this one's a big one for me. How do they sustain themselves? You've got these big 8-foot tall hominids. What are they eating?
Before you answer that one, Pat, and I am really looking forward to hearing your answer, I'm just going to say to everyone in the chat, now would be the time to start tagging me in with questions, because I imagine, 10 minutes, maybe more, and we'll get the questions from the chat to you guys. How does that sound?
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. So I can do this all day. I'm really enjoying this.
I'm having it. Me too. It's a fascinating conversation. I'm really, really enjoying it. But people in chat, if you tag me in, I'm on the Agree to Disagree account, not the Conspiracy Cats account. And if you can make it clear, just put a P if your question's for Pat or an E for Erika, or just make it clear who your question's for, and then I can put it to the right person. So maybe we'll go to those in 10 minutes. But Pat, sorry, I think, what was the question? How do they sustain themselves?
Yeah.
What do they eat? Yeah. Okay, back to you, mate.
What do they eat? Clearly, they eat people.
Really?
It was a joke.
Oh my god! Oh my god! I was like, oh, this. I went from curiosity to terror. Now I don't. That's the fastest way you get people to not research Bigfoot.
Yeah, I know.
Get eaten by a North American hominid.
That's why it was a joke. Yeah. So yeah, I took both of you guys off guard. You were like, oh wait.
I was looking at your face. I was like, is he joking? Is he serious? Oh my god.
No, I mean, they would have to be some kind of omnivore. It's speculated that they eat deer. They might would kill a hog. So they have plenty of meat source in these areas. They would eat a bear. People have reported seeing them eat berries, or some kind of fauna like that. So I mean, I don't know, how is a grizzly bear its size? How is an elephant its size? Like, what are those? What do they eat? So I mean, they're big, but they're not like a Tyrannosaurus Rex kind of size.
I'm more thinking because you're right, like grizzlies and grizzlies are quite big, and as are elephants. But ecosystems tend to support only one organism of that size. Like I'm thinking, okay, obviously, right, if you've got Bigfoot and you've got grizzlies and they're occupying the same ecosystem, they probably have to have separate niches, right? Like they're probably having to occupy different zones of kind of roles, I suppose, because you don't want them competing. But then I'm thinking to myself, okay, so if they're going to kill a deer and a hog, right, which I can get behind, obviously, omnivorous apes are a big, a lot of apes are omnivorous. That's not really the problem. I'm more thinking okay, would we not have that kind of gives them another opportunity for things we should have found, right? Like a butchering site.
Sure.
Or unless they're taking them somewhere else, like to a cave or something, which...
Yeah, in a cave would be very specific to an area.
Right.
There aren't just caves everywhere.
Right, exactly. Yeah. There's known systems and such, but I would imagine that we would find, unless they're eating very similar to a grizzly, which I wouldn't imagine that they would, given they've got these flat faces, right?
Yep.
So they've got these big prognathous snouts, so where they're just goring into something.
Hopefully not.
Yeah, hopefully not, right. Either that or they're just completely stripping these things clean, and so when we come across the remains, we're just like, indistinguishable from any other kind of predator.
Sure.
What do you think? What do you think? How,
I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, you know, human beings have been around for a long time, and we've been eating meat. You know, so we found a way to eat meat. We have canines, obviously. These things are always described as having very flat, like very big flat teeth, with possibly some canines like we have.
Yeah, reduced canines wouldn't be surprising. Paranthropus,
Right.
very reduced canines.
But it's they're almost described whenever somebody's lucky enough to see their teeth. It's always consistently described as very flat, like almost like horse teeth, like so big, like our teeth but bigger. Does that make sense?
No, I mean that again. Like this is why when people are like talking about Bigfoot being a Gigantopithecus, I'm like, no way. If this is anything, it's a Paranthropian. Those guys were big mega.
I agree. I've ruled out Giganto because I mean we've sequenced we've been able to sequence Giganto, and they fall into the sort of orangutan bush.
They're in the Pongo group. Yeah, they're very. I mean, that's where they live too. But so do you suppose that these guys, given that they've got these big flat teeth, in your opinion, are they using tools? Are they tool users? Do they butcher these animals with tools?
I think they kill them with their bare hands.
Like rip them apart?
Yeah, I mean they're incredibly fast. They have 8-foot stride. They could probably run about 30 miles an hour at a full stride. And people have, you know, there again, lots of like not just a few, but lots of people have seen them just move in incredible pace,
like a dead sprint.
Yes, and I mean, it's you could almost say it's supernatural in the way that I always use octopus as an example. Like if you took somebody from and they didn't know anything about octopus, you showed it to them, they would think it's supernatural. We understand it's natural, but they're amazing creatures. They do all these things that are just amazing. So it kind of falls in that category, which is weird. I'll grant you, for a hominid to, have like these supernatural abilities or seem supernatural. They're so natural that they're supernatural. They can dart and move. They're graceful.
That to me, that's from an ecological sense, that's very strange, unless they're retaining it from being like savanna dwellers, right? Because like usually the fast animals live in open plains.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. That's neat. I didn't know that they were characterized that way. That people suppose that they're quite quick. I would imagine it would be more like ambush predators, like a grizzly or something like that. But I mean, I guess grizzlies are fast when they need to be. I'm not faster than a grizzly.
Well, they do. Yeah, exactly. I mean, but that's a 4-legged animal, right? But if you think about it, an 8-foot tall hominid, their legs, that stride and strength would be there to move fast.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would imagine humans, if memory serves, humans cap out at what, 27? I mean, Usain Bolt is 27 miles per hour.
Yeah, roughly. Yeah, sure. That's a fair assessment. Yeah.
Yeah, potentially. Again, for me, the morphology seems to check out. I mean, I have no issue with the morphology of these things. People tend to be like, yes, how would such a creature, evolve? Like, I'm more interested in like.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah,
I don't know that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to. Yeah. It's an interesting thing to kind of puzzle around about. I mean, it's certainly fun.
All I know is that they're there, like, or they appear to be there. I'm not trying to be absolute about things, and my guys would probably get on to me to be more absolute. But the honest truth is, Erika, is that it's a head scratcher for me. It's a phenomena that has no explanation, and I just want an explanation.
Do you think they're natural though? Like, do you think they're natural in the sense that?
Yeah. I'm not like a paranormal guy or anything like that. So they're either natural or there's something that we don't understand, and then I'm done. I'm I'm not touching it. I don't chase ghosts. I don't like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not a paranormal guy. So yeah, I think
that booted around a couple times.
Yeah, and that exists in the Bigfoot world. We have what's called woo in the Bigfoot world, which is the supernatural sort of paranormal. You know that they're associated with aliens or portals, or but that's just when you have this void of information, people tend to fill that void with their own kind of worldview or in themselves.
Right.
So I think that's where a lot of that comes from, even though, there are accounts, if you will, of very strange things happening with associated, but to me, there's not enough accounts.
Yeah, so I would almost place myself where you're at there, but with accounts in general. Like I think there's something strange. I think that in the same way that there are a lot of like UFO sightings that are chalked up to, okay, we don't know what they are, right? It's like I mean, I'm not going to be someone who's going to be like, yeah, we've got it all figured out. Far from it. That's the fun part about science. That's why I'm interested in science, is because we don't have it all figured out.
Right.
And with that transfers over to the Bigfoot realm, and that I think that probably the vast majority of sightings are either misidentifications or people, they see something strange in the distance and they kind of fill in the blanks. The brain is very good at that. But I would also say that there are instances where we see things that are strange, that aren't quite explainable, that we don't readily have an explanation for. And like I said, I love the Patterson Gimlin film. I think as you said, it's a real head scratcher. I don't know what to make of it. And I think it's interesting that guys like Jeff Meldrum, who are hominin locomotion specialists, look at it and they're like, yeah, I don't know what to make of it either. It's really weird. And I think it warrants a look. I would say that. I think that the whole, at least in North America, right, it warrants a look. Why are so many people seeing 8 foot tall or kind of hominin big apes? Why are people seeing apes in the woods?
Exactly.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it warrants look regardless. It's, and just for, if nothing else, then that it's fun and it's interesting, and that's what science is for. Is to say, okay, well, why is it that people are seeing these weird things? Is there something more there? And I'm inclined to be like, I don't know. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't.
Yeah.
But because I come from the human evolution primatology angle, I'm more interested in like, okay, if there is something there, why is there this deficit?
Right. Yeah. What led to that? How did it get to be this? And that's great, man. You guys will get to figure that out once we start getting observations. And
I really hope you're right. That. Like I want nothing more than tomorrow. I want the headline tomorrow to be like, holy crap, we found one. Like, here it is. We have one in, I mean, the captivity thing is sad, right? Like, I want new footage. Like, new footage.
Okay.
Really good.
Hey,
here it is.
Can I ask you this question, Erika? Would you support bringing in a specimen, so basically killing one?
I mean, so I love primates, I really do. And I come from a perspective of like, I would love to know if it were me, if I were in the woods with a gun and I've got my gun trained on a Bigfoot, right? I don't think I've got it in me to.
Oh, you wouldn't. You wouldn't anyway. I promise you.
I don't think I would. Yeah. I don't think bringing in the dead, like I wouldn't have. I couldn't do it, and I wouldn't really want someone. I would always prefer for someone to have like a footage or to find a dead one.
Right.
Like, why can't we find one? Let's find one that's already dead. I would love that. Not for the Bigfoot, but for the sake of the science. But like I don't
okay.
know. I don't.
All right. So you don't support like actively, like being proactive to the point where you think people should try and kill one.
It's not worth it to me. I mean, I want to know, but I don't think I want to know badly enough that because here's the thing. I wouldn't do that for chimps, right? Because I think chimps are cognitively on the level enough that's horrible. I mean, orphaned bonobos, for example, Lola La Bonobo is a great organization that cares for orphaned bonobos. And it's very interesting, but these, in a sad way, but these orphaned bonobos are wholly traumatized, because usually these orphaned ones, they've witnessed the death of their mother, and they have cognitive slopes that are different from the ones that aren't orphaned, because they in the same way that humans do, we rely a lot on our parents when we're young. We're very dependent on them, and if we experience some kind of trauma with relation to that parental figure, it impacts us cognitively. We don't do well with that, which is why organizations, excuse me, like this, they do a great job in pairing up orphan bonobos with human caretakers, and that helps kind of smooth out that burden. But it's like, yeah, I mean, these guys really do. They get traumatized in the way that we do, because we're all a part of the same family, and we've evolved the criteria of our environments in different ways that doesn't make any species better than another. So I would no, I don't think that I would. I don't think, like, if someone was like, we want to discover Bigfoot and we're going to create a hunting task force to do it, I'd be like, screw you guys, that's not cool.
Okay.
I don't want to know that bad.
Yeah. And just for the record, I do not advocate for trying to kill Bigfoot either.
Yeah.
You know, for some of the same reasons that you brought up, and you're putting your life in great danger when you do that, because the general rule in the Bigfoot world is, if you see one, there's another one someplace else watching you. Like, that's how we approach it.
I can't think of a single primate that is known, a great ape that is known and has known to evolve under solitary circumstances. Even orangs, which are considered semi-solitary,
right?
They've only recently, it's been proposed rather, that they've only recently become that because of things like climatic change and habitat fragmentation.
Yeah.
So it's like, primates are really social, and when you've got these big beefy animals that are pretty smart that live in groups, it's like I wouldn't want to mess with them.
Exactly, and that makes it harder to kind of observe them, because if wherever they like camp out or kind of be wherever they are in their own little living room, let's say out in the woods, even if you were to track one, you don't want to track it up to its place of existence, let's say.
Why do you suppose like camera traps haven't gotten them? Like,
that's a good question. They seem to be aware. The best theory is they seem to be aware of them. So the best analogy I could make is that, if somebody put a beach ball on your coffee table, would you notice it?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, so that's kind of the thinking, is that even if you try and put a camera trap up and you camouflage it the best you can, there's also some theories that maybe they can detect infrared in their visual spectrum. And now, again, that's just a sort of a theory. Yeah. So between those two things, it's quite clear the data is in. Camera trail cams have been around for decades, and we haven't gotten any conclusive evidence. So that to me is the data, is that for whatever reason they are leery of that, or they understand what that is. Yeah.
Guys, I've really enjoyed listening to this, but the questions, since I said that, are coming thick and fast. We've got a lot of questions. Now, I'll read out, so like the first one's to you, Erika, but obviously once you've answered, Pat, you can, chip in on it as well. So Larry I'm sure I pronounced that wrong. Apologies, Larry. Says, so if nobody wants to kill a Bigfoot, hang on. Is that the proper first question? Yeah. Okay, so he says, if nobody wants to kill a Bigfoot, what kind of evidence would you need to consider the possibility that they are real, to the point that someone could get funding to investigate?
Yeah, I mean, for me, finding a dead one, that would be great. Or any kind of, when I say a dead one, I mean any kind of trace evidence of the body, right? I mean, a lot of times in the case of the billy ape that we brought up earlier, one of the things that spurred going and funding that expedition was some of the villagers had the remains of one of the skulls. And it had this very subtle sagittal crest along the top, which is very strange for a chimpanzee. Chimps don't tend to have these powerful sagittal crests. And so when researchers were like, okay, we know gorillas don't live in the area. They don't live in this particular section of the Congo. So chimps do. Why does this chimp have a sagittal crest? Is it possible that this is an unknown species of great ape? And that's partially what spurred people wanting to go and find it. So for me, if someone was like, we found a humerus, and it's a big humerus in the woods, like a big old honking arm bone or a leg bone, or because these guys are 8, if they're 8 feet tall, you would know that it is a human. So for me, finding if you just need one, right? Like if you're finding a bone and you're like, where did this come from, right? I think a huge portion of at least the primatological community would be like, okay, maybe there's more to this than we previously thought, and funding would pour in because people. And can you imagine? Can you imagine?
I agree. Like that would be ideal. Like what you just described. Finding a part of a humerus or something. I just think that's personally. I think that's unlikely to happen for whatever reason.
Could be.
There's theories that they bury their dead.
That would make things more difficult.
So I think that's unlikely to happen. I would say to that, it's like the best way to bridge that gap, I think, is with technology. And there's a way to observe them. It's expensive, but I'm going to be attempting it next winter. And so I know how to observe them. And once I get on top of one, I'll be able to observe it for. It'll be way beyond the Patterson-Gimlin film, and we're talking like half an hour, hours of observation.
Have you seen one, Pat?
I've never actually seen one. No.
Okay. I was just curious.
I've had some some encounters I can't explain. That possible. I got screamed at one night, and then I had several years later I had what we call wood knocking incident. So something was banging on a tree in the middle of the night next to my campsite. And that's a very common thing in the Bigfoot world, by the way. Yeah. Like it's very common.
And rock chucking. I've heard they throw rocks.
Yeah.
That's what I think Jeffrey Meldrum covers that in this book, is the wood, hitting the wood and throwing rocks and messing with stuff. That's what he talked about anyways.
Yeah. So no, I've never actually seen one.
I've got to apologise if anyone saw me smirk then, because wood knocking means something different in the UK. So,
sorry. Okay, I'm really sorry, Cats. I'm not trying to demonetize you.
just I couldn't help it. Sorry. Plenty of wood. Oh, I'm gonna stop with the wood knocking jokes. Okay. Iron Charioter says again. This one's for you, Erika. What are the chances of hybridization between species being an evolutionary mechanism for creating creatures such as the Bigfoot?
I couldn't tell you. There's a whole thing where I've had a lot of conversation with creationists, and they tend to have this idea, especially Kent Hovind likes to think that if it can hybridize, it's the same kind. And there's a lot of really weird stuff going around where theoretically, and this is horrible to say, but theoretically, if you were to engage in vitro, humans could potentially hybridize with other great apes. There's a gate around the egg of most hominins called the zona pellucida, and breaking that gate, if you were to do that artificially, is not necessarily out of the question. That's horrifying to think about, and I wouldn't certainly want to know through experiment whether or not that was doable. But hybridization is very interesting because we look along the human evolutionary line, and we know hybridization occurred between us and Neanderthalensis, and us and Denisovans, and Denisovans and Neanderthalensis, and they're relatively separated genetically speaking. And if that's doable between humans and chimps, well, then it likely occurred all along the line. I mean, there's a reason geographic isolation is such a huge factor in speciation, right? Like that's usually how species separate, is they have something that makes it so they can't get together, and it stays there long enough that they isolate genetically. The problem is humans have this thing where we're cognitively inclined, and as do other great apes, and so sometimes hybridization by means of that thing looks different, therefore I won't try to mate with it. Doesn't always work, which is kind of gross. It's a gross feature of humanity, maybe.
Pat, what do you think?
I would say this: a lot of people in the Bigfoot world sort of have a desire for them to be more human-like. So they want to think of them as like friendly cousins, like literally like friendly, like we can exchange gifts and communicate with each other and get to know each other, and so they tend to like want them to be more human-like. So I think
Harry and the Hendersons.
Yeah, sorta, like and unfortunately, they're not like that. They don't appear to be that friendly, and I can't blame them. We're a dangerous species. We are. So
as a side note for that, real quick, if I can, Cats.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that's interesting. I would concur in primatology, right? Like people tend to look at the great apes and they tend to try to say, look at them, they're so like us.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, one, we're more like them, I would argue. It's more we're like them than they're like us. There's more shared along that direction.
I like that. Yeah.
But interestingly enough, like one of my professors who studies the evolution of language, Stuart Semple's got some great work out there. He said to me, he was we don't try enough to meet them on their terms. Instead, we try to apply them to our terms instead of meeting them where they are, because humans aren't the pinnacle. Things don't evolve to be like humans. Things evolve on their own terms in their own environments, and they're best suited for where we find them. Like, so why not meet them where they are? It's just as valid.
Interesting.
Fantastic. Now, after 2 questions for Erika, it looks like we've got 4 on the bounce for Pat. I'll ask those quick, but we have just had a super chat from Russell Kafal, and I just want to say thank you so much for that. He says stay safe, so great advice. Thank you so much, mate, for that. I'll just scroll back up and find where we were in terms of the questions. Okay. So the first one was, I remember the question, but not who it was from. So I forgot who it's from, but the question was, where is the, here we go, it's from Scranton. Where is the dung and do they bury it? And Pat, that was to you.
So people have claimed to have found Bigfoot scat, and I would imagine that would actually happen sometimes. It should be fairly identifiable, but if you're inexperienced, you would mistake bear scat for Bigfoot scat. It depends on what the Bigfoot ate, how that scat would look between protein or some type of vegetation. So to date, we don't have any good really good evidence of Bigfoot scat. I know that Dr. Meldrum said that sometimes people send him scat in the mail, and he's like, no, don't send poop.
You get arrested for that, can't you?
Yeah.
Poor Jeff.
Yeah,
oh my God.
And that does happen. He gets his shirt tugged on quite a bit from the Bigfoot community, and people send him poop. So yeah, we don't know about this. I don't really know where to go with the scat.
I will just jump in. We do have. I am going to be reading the questions from the chat, but a couple of super chats have coming out. I will prioritise those. Russell has sent another question. Thank you again, Russell, for that. I'm not sure if it's a question or a statement or something to comment on, but he said Bigfoot walks on his hands. What's the likelihood of that, Erika, from like a primate point of view of them walking on the hands rather than the feet?
Nah, probably not. I mean, walking on your hands, like primates don't really do that just on their own. You have to train them to do that because blood pressure is a thing. Like you're not going to evolve to have your head way low, pumping blood up to your feet. I mean,
I think what he's talking about is dropping to all fours.
Oh, like knuckle walking?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I would say no. I mean, typically, if you're finding trackways, you're going to find knuckle marks. Walking to, like, let's say, again, let's go on the account that, like, the Patterson-Gimlin film is legitimate. The way that stance is being held, with the head right on top of the vertebral column like that, the way that the arms move, the way that the legs move, this isn't an animal that is inclined to walk quadrupedally very frequently, because, you know, typically where the hole at the base of the skull is going to tell you a lot about how an animal moves. And in the same way, how an animal moves is going to tell you a lot about where the hole at the base of the skull is. And if it's walking that efficiently bipedally, then if it were to try to walk on all fours, it'd be craning its neck like that all the time.
Don't you think that Patty's leg muscles and glutes, I don't know, it almost seems like she could drop to all fours and move that way. Maybe?
I mean, we can drop to all fours and move a little bit if we need to.
Right, yeah.
Like, we're walking on an incline. I mean, who among us has not walked on all fours when you're going up the stairs sometimes? It's just fun. So,
right.
you know, sometimes people just do weird stuff. So, and if they're living in rugged terrain, I mean, I would imagine that if they're moving up steep inclines, I mean, yeah, that's how we do it. I mean, we don't try to stay on 2 feet when we're climbing up a slope like that. But when we, you know, if you look at her proportions, assuming again that the Patterson-Gimlin film is legitimate, the length of the arms to the legs is not going to lend itself, in my opinion, to efficient 4-legged walking.
Okay.
The ratio, like, here's the thing. The ratio for efficient bipedality is very different than the ratio for efficient quadrupedalism. So you can't be efficient at both. And so if Patty's walking the way she does, I would be inclined to say that she's at least an obligate, or at least a habitual biped, but probably more likely obligate.
Godless Scummer for £5. Thank you so much, mate. He's got some world-class advice. He says, definitely do not send poop in the mail. Speaking as a postal worker, I can't stress this enough. So, absolutely. Thank you for that, mate. And Sleet has a question. This is for both of you. I wonder how. I think it's based on what you were saying before about detection, Pat. Actually, so I'll put this to you first. I wonder how well a sensitive passive acoustic array would work for detecting these creatures. I don't know what a sensitive passive acoustic array is. Have you heard of that?
Like maybe a parabolic mic is what he's talking about, and Bigfooters use that all the time. If he's talking about acoustic array, so he's trying to pick up sound, maybe. Not sure.
Sensitive,
I'm not.
Yeah, for sensitive passive acoustic. Yes. Sleep. If you. Yeah, I'm not sure what that means.
To me sounds like putting very sensitive, like you said, parabolics are picking up from everywhere. Very sensitive mics throughout the forest in hopes of catching like some kind of unique vocalization from these guys. I mean, I don't know.
That's been done.
Bigfooting. I don't know. Would that work, Pat?
It's been done hundreds of times, thousands of times, and some interesting vocalizations have been picked up.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Just go back to where we were before on the questions. I'd love to hear some of those. If you've, I mean, I'm sure we'll keep in touch after this, Pat. But if you've got any, maybe you could bring them onto the podcast as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I can. I mean, there's a very famous, which was captured. So again, documented and captured in the 1972, I believe. It's crazy vocalizations, man. It sounds like nothing you've ever heard before, and it's verified that this was actually captured in 1972. Yeah. So if you would, it's the Patterson-Gimlin film of audio.
Right.
Yeah.
I'd be interested in hearing that too. I don't believe.
Just look up Sierra sounds.
Okay.
Love to listen to that. We've got a couple of questions which are similar, so I'm just going to look these together. We've got Joe Blogs and Crafty Keeler, who's doing a great job in the chat. Thanks, Crafty. And they both ask, why is I don't know, you talked about the Patty footage and the sound footage you just mentioned there, but other than those, why is there a lack of physical evidence, videos, pictures?
So here's my theory on that, and it almost has to be because we have actual data over the past 50 years, I'll say, since the Patterson-Gimlin film. We have thousands and thousands of people trying to go out in the woods to get evidence or elicit encounters or try and get that next footage. And it's become quite clear to me that that's actual data. We are outclassed. Whatever these things are, they outclass us. They just, sometimes people in the Bigfoot world call them forest ninjas. And I mean, I think there's something to that because in my mind, I'm like, well, they would almost have to be. Otherwise, they'd be in a zoo, So, it's just something about their comfortability in those environments versus our abilities in those environments. They have to outclass us to be able to avoid us that well and be able to like mess with us and avoid us.
Erika, what do you think?
I think Pat probably knows about that more than me. The only thing I would have to say about that is that it's like, if this animal is around, I would imagine Pat's right. That would have to be the situation. The likelihood of that situation, I don't know that you can even judge. Who's to say? I would. The thing is like with the Billy apes, right? Like we set out to find them and then we found them. There would have to be a huge cognitive gap between them and whatever we're dealing with here. And I'm very interested to see, like, if we could get a skull, that would be very interesting too, because then we could be like, wow, this is a huge brain case, or maybe not. I don't know. It's interesting to think about. I'd never really considered the idea that they just like that, kind of what Pat's put out here, that if they're there, that they know we're trying to get a hold of them, like, and that they're like actively like, no, we don't want you to get evidence of us.
Yes, there's something to that. And everybody, almost everyone that's ever looked one in the face says, I saw intelligence in this being. It wasn't even like looking at a chimp. It was like looking at a person, is what they say. And they seem to know what guns are. They don't like things in our hands. So if you got something in your hands, they don't like that. I don't know why. And I'm not even saying that maybe that's an actual thing. It just seems to be a thing. That's what I'm getting off the anecdotal accounts.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Seek Truth, Speak Truth says, Pat, have they or any evidence that they've discovered fire yet?
Wow. So most people in the Bigfoot world would just outright say, nope, they don't build fires. I'm not one of those people. I'm like, okay, so you say they don't build fires. When was the last time you like got on a hilltop and watched them for, 2 hours and see if they build a fire or not? We don't know if they build fires or not. And I have a personal, friend who's passed away, who told me that he saw one build a fire. And he's no longer with us. I wish he was, but so I have at least one guy that said, yeah, they do build fires. And so at the end of the day, I don't know, and neither does anybody else, because there's a lack of observation.
Cool. Do you think, Erika, that primates, as you understand them, could accidentally stumble upon or figure out how to make fire?
Well, I mean, the interesting thing is we think, first of all, you can train a chimp to start a fire. A bonobo to start a fire. They've done that with Kanzi. He actually learned how to use a match, which is kind of funny. And then started the fire. He built the fire, started the match, and then roasted marshmallows on it. They recorded the whole thing, and he understood it and carried out the task. So, and it's very interesting, because chimps are quite smart. Canins are quite smart, and they have like 1/3 the brain case size that we do. So I would imagine the running hypothesis is that when fire usage started in hominins, it was scavenging fire. So a wildfire that they then realized, hey, fires keep you warm, and then they kept that fire up. Like the gap between harnessing and using fire that they found and then kept running for literally decades versus starting a fire actively, that's a huge cognitive leap. So, I mean, and obviously, I think it's fair to say that if Bigfoot are using fire, it would have to be the latter. It would have to be that they would be capable of starting it, because I think it'd be easier to notice an upkeep of fire that continuously travels.
Yeah.
Maintain. And what that suggests, at least to me, with my understanding of human evolution and of primates, that would suggest a pretty smart animal. I mean, you're dealing with a brain case size that's 900 cc's, 1,000 cc's is usually what we associate with actively being capable of starting their own fire tools, which is pretty damn smart. I mean, shoot, if you got an 8-foot tall hominin that's got a brain case that big, I don't know. Maybe they are smart enough to just avoid us. Who knows?
Okay, so John Norris asked a question, but I think we've answered this one, and he was talking about the widespread use of cell phone cameras. Why has the number of sightings not gone up? But you've kind of mentioned that with the whole avoidance thing, haven't you?
And I can answer that further, Katz.
Yeah.
Okay, so the way I always put it is, you're in a lovely stroll through the woods up in the Pacific Northwest, and a grizzly bear that has 2 cubs jumps out of the woods and just gives you a fierce growl. What's not the first thing you're gonna do? Pull your cell phone out and take a picture of it? Like, you're dealing with an angry grizzly bear, like, you're probably not gonna pull your phone out and try and take a picture of it. You're probably just gonna back away. So that I would say it's the same kind of effect when people see a Bigfoot, especially since they're like, "Oh my God, what is this thing?" Like, they're in shock. So the last thing they're going to do is pull out their cell phone to take a picture of it. And if you, again, they seem to they don't want things in our hands. They seem to get aggressive when we have things in our hands. And so between those two factors, that's why, this whole idea of, well, everybody's got a cell phone, they got a camera in their pocket. Why don't we have more footage? That's why, basically.
Erika, next one's for you from Crafty Keeler, and she's asking, how likely is it for hominids of this size, knowing how destructive humans are, to remain completely hidden from humans all this time? How likely is it?
I mean, so that's where part of my skepticism kind of comes in. I mean, it's not completely unheard of. We didn't discover bonobos until I believe the 60s or the 70s, and we didn't discover billy apes until 2001 with confirmation. But the difference with that is these guys are primates, large primates living in the heart of Africa, where civil unrest has made it very difficult for us to get out there in the first place, and then looking around for them takes a long time. So to me, it almost is a double-edged sword for Bigfoot, right? Because on one hand, that's like, okay, well, we're still discovering up until somewhat recently, like the past 30 years, new primates that are quite big. So that's positive for the Bigfoot side. But on the other hand, these are organisms that are living in some of the most difficult to reach places on the planet, and we still did indeed discover them. So to me, it's finding undiscovered apes, large apes, up until relatively recently, is a double-edged sword for the Bigfoot situation. In addition to that, that's kind of why I was asking, okay, well, how is Bigfoot sustained? And it's very interesting to me that if they live in these large groups, it would almost seem to be even more of a problem as far as like, okay, how are they sustaining themselves? Because if they are living in groups, I would imagine that they're maybe having like cooperative hunting or cooperative foraging. I would almost imagine that, you would propose like a fission fusion society, similar to what we see with chimps, so that they get together sometimes, and other times they're solitary. They forage alone, they hunt alone, they don't do these things in groups. because the group thing makes it almost harder for them to stay hidden. But I mean, I'm a Bigfoot agnostic for a reason. I don't know. I like the idea of the possibility. I don't think that we can rule out some kind of large animal living in North America. I don't think it's very likely. But as Pat has outlined here today, I mean, there are certainly some weird things going on. Who am I to say what those weird things are? I think it deserves some attention. Do I think that there's a large, an 8-foot tall North American hominid? I don't know. I lean towards no, but I'm certainly not going to rule it out. I don't know enough about it to say.
Okay, Pat, did you have anything you wanted to add to that one?
Yeah, I would say that they're not completely, as was framed in the question, like completely hidden, because people are encountering them. So that's a thing that's happening. So there is human interaction with these creatures, whatever they are. It's just that most people don't recognize that they're out there. But then again, most people don't go out in the woods, honestly. Mm-hmm. We live in big conglomerate giant cities, and kind of stick to those areas. And there's some recreational things that happen in the woods, but for the most part, there's tons of area for them to be in where people just don't go. And as far as their groupings, like it would again, I would say they would have to be rare, rare species to begin with, and then their groups would be rather small, I would imagine. Again, like I'm just kind of theorizing, like what would it take? How would that work? For a undiscovered hominid in North America, a family pod, and then maybe there's another family pod 40 miles away, and so if you start looking at it that way, it's just, they're not easy to find. I can tell you that.
Okay, so we've got, so many questions, and I apologize, I'm not going to be able to get through them all because they're still coming in, and I've got loads. So I'm aware that I've taken, a good couple of hours of your time off you. So I'm going to choose one more question each. The first one I want to choose is from Spark. I think it was Spark 344. I've scrolled past it now, and it won't let me. I can't find it. And the question was for you, Erika, and I'm going to have to reword it because I can't remember it exactly, but it was something along the lines of the physical frame of these type of primates. Could it possibly sustain an animal of that size? I'm sorry for rewording your question, Spark.
Yeah, it's interesting. It seems to me, like, based off of what Pat said, that it almost seems to try to abide with like the square cube law, which is like as things get bigger, they almost start to look triangular, especially if they're on 2 feet, because you obviously can't sustain something that large with human proportions, so it doesn't work. It's very difficult on the heart, for instance, like to pump blood up that high, and then for such a slender looking animal. Which is why it's kind of interesting that they seem to lack these necks and seem to, have these like big wide hips with, big feet and, relatively tapered as you move upward. I think that's kind of interesting. I think that, it almost works, especially if you're going with a paranthropine style animal that is adapting itself to these larger body sizes. I tend to wonder why it's adapted these large body sizes. Why is it so big? Why is it large? What does it eat? How does it maintain that caloric intake? For instance, we know Neanderthals, for instance, are shorter than us. They were shorter hominins than we are, but they were more robust. They were heavier. They had larger brain cases than we do. And because of that, they required almost double the caloric intake that we do. These guys were constantly going after big kills, and they were eating the most calorie-rich parts of the animal. Unlike us, we tend to favor the muscles. They went for the organs, which is really interesting, and it makes sense because they're living in an area where they've got to be eating pretty much all the time. Or you look at gorillas; they're huge primates. They're massive. They're the biggest great apes. And they spend, because they're mostly herbivorous. They're classified as omnivores because they do, they're opportunistic. but they spend almost all their day eating and digesting to maintain this massive body size. So I tend to think, okay, is it possible for an animal like Bigfoot to exist? Yes, for the size, for the proportions. How would it sustain itself in a way that would lend itself to being hidden? I would almost think no, because it would have to eat so much so often to maintain it. But does that make it impossible? Well, no, not impossible, just, I guess unlikely, which is why we're having this conversation.
Pat, anything you want to add to that one before I get to your last question?
No, I mean, that's a very very fair way of putting it, and again, I don't have the answers for that, like how they can maintain their body size or why they get so big. Like you talk about square cube law. I've always used square cube law to say to people in the Bigfoot world, they don't get. Some people want to think they get 15 feet tall.
Oh my gosh!
Well, that's okay for a biped. That's impossible. They wouldn't be able to stand up, literally. So we're pushing it to 8, 9, 10 max. Because it would at that point, beyond that, square cube law would just gravity just put you on the ground.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know, how they're so big, but again, like I'm not an expert on the evolution of how we could have even gotten there. So.
Cool. So I just noticed speak to. Sorry, buddy. I meant I didn't see the thing for that man. He sent a super chat in, so thank you so much for that, buddy. Just saying, what a lovely, fun debate, and I think you both made it that way. So thank you so much for that.
I really have.
Cool. Well, the topic's interesting, but it's the debate's only as interesting as how civil and articulate the debaters are. So thank you both for that. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So what was the other? Oh, Sleet, who asked the question before about the sonar array. I've scrolled past his comments, so again, I'm going to have to paraphrase it. But he was explaining to someone else in the chat what it was, and it sounded, from my quick scan, that it was like some sort of sonar type thing. It would
sure. Some
like
kind of radar pinging kind of thing.
Yeah, I might have got that wrong again, so he might post again and tell me how wrong I've got it. But it sounded like it was something like that from me scanning it. But I've lost the place. Okay, so the last one. That is a good question, and I'll put this to you, Pat.
Okay.
Can't somebody just send a helicopter over that's got heat-seeking gear in the areas to identify these animals?
Yes, they could, if they have millions of dollars.
Which would be great. So if you get, and that's what you said before, Erika, isn't it? You get that femur or that skull or whatever, and then that justifies the spend.
So that is the thing. That is how we observe this, whatever it is, Sasquatch, I'll call it. That's what I like to call it. Is from the air. Absolutely 100%. For a helicopter with a thermal camera, you're talking millions of dollars of expenses. The kind of thermal camera that attaches to a helicopter is probably $500,000 right there just for the camera. Fortunately, all that technology from 20 years ago exists in a handheld platform that you can buy for $10,000. It's called the aerial thermal drone. That's how we observe them. And I'm a licensed drone pilot. I'm a FAA certified drone pilot. So I'm a professional drone pilot, and I will be getting a thermal drone sometime in the summer and next winter when the canopy drops. Because you have to have the canopy down to see, you can't see through the canopy.
Yeah.
It's real thick. But up here in North Georgia, that canopy goes away, and it's like looks like Hiroshima,
Right.
And I will be using the thermal drone to find and observe Sasquatch. And Erika, I'll show you that footage when I get it.
Hey, please listen. Please do. I'm excited. I wish. Winter can't come fast enough. Honestly,
Yeah.
I would love nothing more than for there to be a big North American hominid. That would be awesome.
Well, if I find them, if I get them on film, Erika, I'll show you, and you two cats. Sure. Like, why not? We'll have a big watch party. I'll share the screen.
Please, yeah. Listen, I'm ready.
Well, I suppose now's a good time before I read out the last super chat there to say that if you want to follow the story, because I'll be following that, then check out the link in the description, which will take you to Pat's channel, and also obviously Erika's channel is in there as well, and they are both definitely worth a subscribe. We've had a super chat from Dildo Baggins, who's super chatted just to make me read out his name, I'm sure. So Dildo Baggins says, hello, cats. So thank you so much for that, mate. So, yeah, absolutely fantastic. Well, you know what? Sorry. I've really, really enjoyed that. And I hope this isn't the last time that I speak to both of you, because it'd be great to have you on for different things. You've got a debate. Do you want to advertise your Flat Earth debate? You both got debates today, haven't you? Have you? Or is this your only debate?
I've got one coming up, unfortunately. On Wednesday, I'm debating Mr. Batman on young Earth creationism. So it's going to be it's not going to be fun like this one was, because this was enjoyable and a fun discussion. Mr. Batman is not, from what I've seen of him, he's not as cordial. So it's definitely going to be a little more heated. But it's going to be a modern day debate. So if you want to subject yourself to that, like I'm choosing to, you can come there on Wednesday.
Right, we'll check that out definitely. Pat, you've got one. Is it today? Is that also a modern day debate?
Yeah, we are supposed to do a Flat Earth debate tonight on Modern Day Debate, 8 o'clock Eastern. But they're like the two guys, the two Flat Earthers, like one backed out and one got arrested and is in jail. So
oh my god!
Yeah, shocker, right?
Yeah.
So James is struggling to. I think he's trying to get the Flat Earth Brothers on. So I don't know if that's going to happen or not. It all depends on if he can line up the opponents. So yes, I may be doing a debate, Flat Earth debate later, which is going to be so much fun for me. So different. Like it won't be like this. You know how that goes, cats, right? And you too, Erika, right? You've debated Flat Earthers. Yeah.
Oh yeah. You're gonna be This is a fun, cordial discussion. Flat Earth debates don't often go that way.
No, I agree. Again, let me remind you guys, both of you, and chat and everybody watching. Bigfoot is not a belief for me. It's not a cherished belief. It's whatever it is. My only thing is that the phenomena is real, and I want to explain that phenomena. So even if I'm nuts, okay, well that explains it. I'm just nuts. Fine, I'm cool with that.
We would love to have you on the Almost Unbelievable podcast to talk about this further. Speaking of Almost Unbelievable, we are doing an Easter Sunday live tomorrow where I don't know what Rancy's going to bring. I'm going to be talking about reincarnation, the work of Dr. Ian Stevenson, who was a very high-level he was a chair of medicine. I forget which university it was now, but he was a well-respected scientist, but he spent a lot of time documenting reincarnation stories over 3,000. So I'm going to bring some of those tomorrow. I think that's about 1 o'clock we decided. I don't know if Grant is still in the chat, but if he is, he will say. Other than that, it's been great. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you everybody who's asked questions. Thank you those who've super chatted. Thanks to those who've just been here watching. Thank you, mostly to the people who've debated. You've been so good. It's been so civil. It's been a really interesting discussion. I hope to see you both again. But for now, I'm going to go and get a curry and have a beer. So, because it's that time for me.
I like it.
Yeah, I'm a bit ahead of you. Absolutely. So, oh God, super chats just flashed in. J.O. Warren, thank you so much again, J.O. Thank you so much. Who says, I don't know who Chris Cooper is. Apparently he's an actor. I'm sure this is a compliment, but anyone else think Pat looks like Chris Cooper if it had chosen a different path? Who's Chris Cooper? What's he been in? The actor.
I don't know. I don't know who that is either. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to Google it now. I'm gonna have to Google it before we go, and I'm gonna give my
Your
impression on that. I'm gonna give my assessment.
Yeah, hold on, I'll check it out too. I got it.
And by the way, Erika and Katz, I offered this to Katz earlier. It's like you're welcome on my platform anytime you want. We have live panel discussions, and it's people like me. You know, it's like similar, kind of like-minded, critical thinking, even skeptical, and we talk about the phenomenon. And so if you find it interesting and fascinating, you ever want to be a part of that discussion, Erika, you're welcome to.
When do you host it?
Once or twice a week. Lately, I've been doing it a lot on Fridays, so I could schedule it, for whenever. But usually Friday night we'll just kind of put together a panel and just and just talk Bigfoot.
It sounds like fun.
Yeah,
I'd do it if it's open mic.
Yeah. Both of you are welcome. Yeah, both of you.
I can see the Chris Cooper thing, by the way, Katz.
I've just Googled it. I've just looked at the Wikipedia image, and he is a famous actor who's been in American Beauty, The Ring. He's got massive filmography. And if you look at the Wikipedia photograph, different haircut, change haircut, you could, if the Bigfoot thing doesn't work out, you could have a career as like what do they call it? A double.
Stand-in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh God! Another. Sorry, we'll go in a minute, but we have just had another super chat, so I can't not ring that out. And it's from again, Dildo Baggins. But this time it's not just so I read his name out. It is a question for you, Erika. He says, "Can you ask Mr. Batman why he chose Batman when Batman is an atheist?"
I'll find some time to ask him that. I don't know. I need to work since I'm his opponent. I need to work on I relive in a society Joker impression. If I'm the opponent, I'm the villain in Mr. Batman's story. So.
Oh,
brilliant.
Good luck.
Well,
good luck with that, Erika.
I know. I'm not 100% sure why I agreed to it, but whatever. It'll be fun. Maybe.
Well, you enjoy that, and I'll hope to catch both your debates, and we'll keep in touch and on the channel. We'll get you on the podcast. We'll do all that. We'll keep in touch and do more of this. It's been great fun, guys. Thank you so much. You've been absolutely brilliant. I really appreciate it, and thank you everyone for watching. But this is me signing off. Goodbye.